The cardinal tasked by Pope Francis to carry out a peace mission to try to help end the war in Ukraine is visiting Kyiv. Matteo Zuppi is on a 2-day visit to the Ukrainian capital. Since the war started in February of 2022, Francis and the Vatican have tried to offer themselves as possible peace brokers. But today, their efforts have not been successful. Zuppi is from a Rome-based peace group. In 1992, the organization brokered a deal that ended the civil war in Mozambique, which had killed about 1 million people and displaced about 4 million. Well, for the very latest, we can speak now with our Arise chief correspondent, John Cookson, who's returned to London after reporting last week from Ukraine. John, great to see you. Well, the Russians claim they have successfully fought off a Ukrainian counterattack in Donetsk. Can we believe what Moscow says?
Hi, ladies. Great to see you. Well, I think on this occasion, probably we can, because the operation that they're talking about seems to make sense to me. Look, there's been a lot of talk about the Ukrainian counteroffensive, the spring offensive that's turned into a summer offensive. And the plain truth is that to mount the kind of attack that the Ukrainians have to do to reclaim territory would involve more than 150, maybe 200,000 troops, and they also need air advantage too, and the military hardware to do that. Kind of like the D-Day operation. They're not in that position. So trying to punch through an area of, say, 30 kilometers in the south of Russian-occupied territory does make sense to me. There's been talk, of course, about this counteroffensive. And the counteroffensive that the Ukrainians are capable of doing is just something like this. A limited attack across, say, 15 kilometers and to take on the Russians. And it seems this time that they failed. Now, there's been no any evidence at all from Kyiv about this operation. They stayed quiet, which also suggests to me that it probably did take place, and they probably did suffer big losses, the Russians claiming 250 Ukrainian soldiers killed. So if this was a part of the much-planned counteroffensive and a limited attack, it seems on the surface, at least from the Russian point of view, that it failed and that the Russians were victorious here. Now, this could be very serious for the Ukrainians, who have to show to the West that they are capable of making significant gains, because Zelensky knows that, Western nations can be very fickle when it comes to war. And although Western nations have been very, very supportive, as soon as it seems that the Ukrainians are not being able to make any progress or have defeats, as they may have done in this last operation, then that support from the West will start to waver. And of course, that's the last thing that Kyiv wants at this time. Now, this is all speculation, because we don't know whether this was the first stirrings of a major counteroffensive, or rather a limited counteroffensive in one particular place. If it was, then unfortunately for the Ukrainians, it's failed this time.
Well, John, the Ukrainians are also continuing their campaign just across the border in Russia. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, when we talk about the Ukrainians carrying out the campaign, it's actually a Russian rebel group, the Russian Volunteer Corps, and another rebel group who are operating, it seems, across the border from Kharkiv, about 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers inside in the Belgorod region. And that was where, you recall, there was a major fight, a major conflict about 2 weeks ago. And these cross-border raids seem to be going on. Sadly, a number of Russian civilians have lost their lives too in the latest attack. So this seems to be a distraction that Kyiv is operating using these Russian rebels just inside Russian territory. Further south in Bakhmut, long fought over a year now. The Russians claim that they hold it. The Ukrainians saying today that they're making advances on Bakhmut, but don't provide any visual evidence of that. So you have these other side operations going on, as well as what we believe is the first stirrings of the main counteroffensive.
Well, John, you've just returned from a 2-week assignment in Ukraine for Rise News, and of course you did a great job, in my opinion. But what is your overall impression of how the people are coping?
Well, look, they've been at war now for more than 15 months, and they're weary. People, roused from their beds at 2 and 3 in the morning with air raid sirens night after night. And sadly, a number of Ukrainians losing their lives in these strikes, these airstrikes by cruise missiles and also drones fired from over the Black Sea by the Russian Air Force. And, it gets you down. I've been there. I've been in the bunkers, in the shelters with them. And I think it was the sixth night of attacks that all of us, that's people in Kiev at the time last week, went through. And it does grind you down. However, not one person I spoke to spoke of defeat. They were confident that the Ukrainians will be successful in this war, however long it takes. Then I went over to Kharkiv, a beautiful city, just 40 kilometers from the Russian border. A similar story there, air raid sirens almost every day, but no actual rockets landing as far as we knew. And it's the same mentality. They're weary, but they're confident of victory. And the people of Kharkiv were telling me that they're just living for the day. There are far more weddings than there normally are in Kharkiv, because people are getting married because they don't know what the future is. That's just one element of life. But apart from that, there was food in the shops. People, apart from being wary of the war, were in good spirits and confident of victory. And the other thing I would say about Kharkiv was that before the war started, it was a population of 1.5 million. Now hundreds of thousands of people left, but now they are returning to their cities. And Kharkiv is a good example of where it was once 1.5 million, went to just hundreds of thousands, and now it's returned more than a year on to 1 million people living in Kharkiv. So the Ukrainians are feeling confident enough to return to their normal lives.
Thank you very much, Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson.